So as we've done the last couple of years, rather than drilling down into one specific topic, we're going to look back at a handful of ideas, strategies, and trends that we've discussed in our various insiders presentations this year, with the goal of highlighting some of the best biz dev ideas of 2024, and more importantly, how you can use those ideas to create leads and appointments in 2025. So it will be a little bit more casual and free-flowing than our usual insider sessions, but it's a great opportunity to revisit some of the ideas that can have the biggest impact on your success in the coming year. But let's start by taking a step back and give ourselves a little self-assessment. So think back to the beginning of 2024. Do you remember the goals that you set for yourself? Did you meet them? And your goals aren't necessarily about results. They can and should be as much about your process as they are about outcomes. So in addition to asking yourself, did I close X number of deals? Ask yourself, did I do the things that I committed to doing in 2024 to optimize my process for better outcomes? Along those same lines, what did you change about your approach in 2024 that worked or didn't work? And have those changes, successes, or failures made you more or less confident in the process you're using heading into 2025? So we're going to walk through some of the big ideas from our previous insider sessions. Before I do that, Deborah, did you have anything you wanted to add here at the top of the presentation?
I was thinking about the fact that BusinessWise turns 45 years old in 2025. And right now it feels like a time of uncertainty to me. And yet, gaining new clients remains critical to all of us. So we press on. And I remember my mother's words that always told me that most things in life that have value take hard work. So let's get to work.
Thanks, Deb. So I wanted to start our best of 2024 review with a topic that we covered way back in February of this year. Excuse me. How sales reps use the power of social proof to turn their past successes into future leads, appointments, and clients. And this is sort of part of a series that we've done over the past few years where we've taken a specifically deep look into one of the principles of persuasion laid out in the book by Robert Cialdini in his book, Influence the Power of Persuasion. It's a set of ideas that we've talked about frequently over the years. In each of the past several years, we've taken one of those principles and we've dived a little bit deeper into it. So this year we looked at the power of social proof. So according to Dr. Cialdini in his book, Influence the Psychology of Persuasion, social proof is based on the premise that people look to the actions of others as a guide, especially when they're uncertain about what to do. So in our example here, you have the owl on top saying how much he and everyone he knows loves a certain product, which helps the orange owl on the bottom get past her uncertainty and take the plunge. But the reason social proof is so powerful is that it's about more than just receiving the assurances that come with somebody else's experience. It's also about the drive to be part of something bigger, to be part of a team, or to avoid missing out. So for example, one really interesting study showed that people are more likely to reuse hotel towels when there's a note indicating that the majority of other guests in the hotel do so as well. So the guests weren't thinking, oh, reusing our towels sounds awesome. They were motivated by the desire not to be seen as wasteful or out of step with the majority. So this example highlights how social proof influences behavior as guests adjust their actions based on perceived norms and practices of others. So now that's all well and good in sort of a esoteric study, but for the purposes of B2B sales reps, we want to know how you can use social proof to improve your lead gen process. So let's take a look at a couple of concrete ways that sales reps can incorporate social proof into their process. So the first question we should ask is, how can you use social proof to improve your cold calling results? So here's the challenge. Cold calling, especially those first few seconds, is really a battle against time. You only have a few seconds to capture your prospect's interest and extend the life of the conversation. So this is where the strategic use of social proof can really become invaluable. By weaving in compelling stories of success and satisfaction from similar clients or industries early in your cold call, you can quickly signal to your prospect that engaging with you is worth their time and attention. So the goal is to demonstrate the tangible value that they stand to gain from a conversation with you. And if you do this effectively, social proof not only piques interest, but also lays the groundwork for a mutually beneficial exchange where the prospect is more inclined to invest their time and attention. So basically, the owl on the top here says, if I can quickly convince my prospect that a conversation with me will provide value, then the owl on the bottom will happily agree to give her time and attention. So let's look at a specific example of how this might work. This is obviously extremely common on a cold call for your prospect to ask some variation of the question, who are you with, or what do you do? But even though it's easy to anticipate this type of question, it's really hard to answer it in a way that doesn't end up being a long-winded description of your products, features, and benefits, which is the last thing you want to do on a cold call where your focus should really be about the things that your prospect cares about. So here's an idea for how to answer this question that comes from Jason Bay of Outbound Squad. And as a way to avoid talking about features and benefits, Jason encourages the sort of who, what, how approach, where you talk about what you do through the lens of somebody that you've helped. And that's really social proof in action. So when somebody says, what do you guys do? Here's an example of what you can say. Great question. A VP of sales that I work with at a company called Company Name was in a situation where they faced a problem and where they wanted to achieve a goal. They used my help to achieve the solution. And I'm curious, what are you going to address that same problem? So for our purposes today, the critical element of this script is that it very smoothly uses the concept of social proof as a way of avoiding the features and benefits trap. So instead of talking all about your business and what you offer, you tell a story about how someone like your prospect has benefited from working with you. And then critically, it ends with a question, putting the focus back on the prospect in a way that subtly stacks them up against that industry peer that you've just described helping. So it's a really smart and effective way of using social proof to navigate one of the most tricky phases of the cold call. But what about email? So with so much competition in the inbox from so many unreliable sources, the goal of any sales rep doing cold email outreach is to differentiate yourself by demonstrating credibility. So to make your prospect really believe that they'll get value from a conversation with you. And social proof is a really effective way to do just that, because your past successes can help you demonstrate that you are a source of valuable insights and therefore significantly increase the chances of your emails being read, replied to, and engaged with. Now, you could use a quote from a current client as a kind of testimonial and add social proof to your email that way. But here's a more creative way to go about it. This is an example of an email from, I guess, mid-2023 from a company that helps improves sales performance. And as you can see, it uses the problems faced by other sales execs as a way to ask a question about the challenges the prospect is facing. So you can see the very first line is, I'm reaching out with a quick sales related question that might shed some light on your outlook for the rest of this year. And then it says, the execs I've been speaking with recently almost always mention one of two problems. They're either struggling to find new leads or they're having difficulty closing deals with the leads they do have. And then farther down in the email, you can see that the sender offers to share some case studies where they were able to help clients grow revenue by up to 40%. So social proof is at work here in a number of different ways by mentioning sales executives that this person works with and the challenges that they're currently facing. So that demonstrates insights and expertise. And then later by offering to provide information about the specific ways you've helped clients. Deb, did you have anything you wanted to add on social proof in general, or how we've suggested using it in these two cases?
I think you've said it very well. And I'll let you go ahead, Sam.
Okay, thanks. All right, so segueing on that last email point, for our second big idea from 2024, we're going back to the spring when we talked about how sales reps can personalize their one-off emails to prospects to generate more replies and start more conversations. And what we talked about in this presentation was, again, those one-off emails. These are not mass lead gen campaigns or even drip automated campaigns. This is sort of most valuable and important in the context of a one-off email to one of your very top prospects. That's something you can do by sending an email directly from the BeWise tool. And it's a great way to mention very specific things that might resonate with your top prospects. And the reason I think this is such an important concept is that it seems easy and obvious, the idea of personalization to these top prospects who you're sending a one-off email to, but it's really hard to pull off effectively. And the most successful approaches to personalization are the ones with the most nuanced understanding of what we as sales reps are trying to achieve in our cold prospecting emails. So in March, when we discussed this, we talked about this great way of framing the importance of personalization, which came from a woman named Samantha McKenna of an organization called SAM Sales Consulting. So according to McKenna, if I'm your prospect, I want you to show me you know me. So in other words, I want to feel like you understand me, my work, and my goals and challenges. And then here are 3 key ways that you can do just that. The first is that you can show me that you know what I'm up to, what my specific role is in the company, what my strengths and interests are, and what I've been up to lately. The reason that's so important is you have your prospect's attention at that moment. You don't want to squander that opportunity by not mentioning something specific to the prospect you're speaking with. Second, you can show me that you know what I'm trying to achieve by demonstrating an understanding of the company that I work with and for the solutions and services that I provide to my clients. And then finally, you can show me you know the obstacles and challenges that I face through your expertise in the industry that I work with, specifically solving common problems and eliminating common obstacles. So there are sort of 3 levels when you look at this. You have the prospect level, sort of the individual person, their role, what they do at the company, and anything they've been doing recently. You have the company level, which is the specific company you're working with and anything that they may be doing lately or specific products and services that they offer. And then you have the industry level, which is common challenges and obstacles. So let's dig into these, each of these a little bit deeper. So the first key way you can personalize, as I mentioned, is to focus on the person you're reaching out to, your prospects. So in other words, personalization really starts with the person. So you should try and find out and leverage info about them, their career path, and their recent professional activities. And by far the best place to look for info about your individual prospect is on LinkedIn. So typically for an active LinkedIn user, you can find out who they are, where they went to school, their current role at their company, their relevant skills and professional interests. You can find out where they are in their career, their employment history, how long they've been with the current company, and whether they've been promoted recently. And then finally, you can find out what they've been up to lately, posts that they've made about business topics, projects or initiatives they've been involved in, or articles that feature them or their work. And before I continue, I just want to acknowledge that this can seem like a lot of info. So I want to emphasize here that the point of personalization is not to throw someone's entire life history or life story back at them, but rather to find individual pieces of information that you can use to grab their attention and start a conversation that delivers value to them. So I want you to take this as sort of a list of ideas for finding those 1 or 2 pieces of information that you think would really resonate with a prospect in an email. So then again, the next level of personalization has to do with the company where your prospect currently works. And while this may be less personal than your prospect's individual skills and interests, it has everything to do with their current professional life, obviously, and everything to do with your current professional life. So after all, you're in B2B sales, which means you're looking to help your prospect's business solve a problem. So it's critical to locate and use info about their company as well. And whether you're looking on the company's website or on LinkedIn, there's a trove of information that you can find and deploy. You can find how they serve their clients. So what problems do they help solve? What products or services do they offer? You can also find how long they've been in business. Deb mentioned we've been in business for over 40 years. That's a valuable piece of information to know when you're reaching out to Business-Wise. So are they an old company? Are they trying to adapt? Are they a new company trying to find their niche? And then finally, what's new with the company? So similar to when you're looking at the recent activities of an individual, you can look to see if they've made any recent announcements or changes at the company level, and have their executives been featured in any way? Is there information sort of in that arena that you can use to pique their interest? And then finally, you can include personalized information about your prospect's industry. So strictly speaking, this may be the least personal category of information, but the good news is that it's stuff that you already have in your head because you have experience and expertise in helping clients in that same industry. So think about what you know about your prospect's industry that can help provide them with a new perspective on their goals and challenges. So the next thing I wanted to cover was just a few things that you should not try to do when you're personalizing, some mistakes and pitfalls that you should avoid in your efforts to personalize your emails. We've all probably been on the receiving end of some misguided attempts at personalization. So you already know that some attempts backfire. So for example, be careful with personal or irrelevant info. So your prospects' hobbies and favorite sports teams have nothing to do with their business goals. So just be very careful about how you use that type of information. On a related note, don't try to be a stalker. Digging too deep into your prospects' Instagram, for example, for info might come across as a little creepy. And then finally, don't be unprofessional. The bottom line here is your email is about business. So even though you're trying to personalize it at some level, you want to keep it about business. And then again, it's important to reiterate that the point of personalization is not to precisely catalog everything you can find out about your prospect, their company, and their industry, and then throw their entire life story back at them in an email. Your goal is to find those nuggets of info that you can use to start a conversation that provides value to your prospect. So as you do your research, constantly ask yourself, what is interesting? What piques your interest about your prospect's career path, skills, and activities? Is there any overlap with your own? What's different about them? What's unique or special about your prospect's career path, skills, or activities? And what do you think your prospect would be most proud of? And then finally, what's relevant? Your prospects want business help, not a new best friend. So stick to info that's relevant to their and your professional lives. And again, there's a lot of info here, but all of it was just designed to provide a roadmap for little pieces of information that might pique a prospect's interest, resonate with them, get that conversation started, and as Samantha McKenna says, show them that you know them. Deb, did you have anything else you wanted to offer here in addition to what you've already said?
I don't think we spend enough time talking with our colleagues about preparing for these kinds of things and sharing what works. And I think that your colleagues can be a great source of information in this arena.
So this is from an insider session just last month, as I mentioned. This is about whether generative AI has improved over the course of the past year in their ability to help sales reps become better writers. So AI obviously had another big year in 2024, but we've been curious about whether it's getting better at writing emails that meet the criteria needed for prospecting success, writing clearly, getting to the point, sounding human, and offering insights and value in exchange for a reply. So in our Best of 2023 Insiders presentation from a year ago, we also looked at AI, specifically whether it could help write emails that demonstrated insights and value that are critical to starting conversations with your prospects, as I mentioned earlier. But this year I wanted to talk about a slightly different aspect of AI, one where it's made some pretty significant strides, and that's the importance of sounding like an actual human. It's pretty simple. When your prospects feel like there's a real person on the other side, they're more likely to respond and engage. That's because human-sounding emails stand out in the inbox that's otherwise full of robotic marketing emails. So since your goal is to start a conversation with another human, your email will be more successful if it sounds like it's part of that conversation, written in the way that humans converse, as opposed to being overly formal or full of jargon. So in essence, it needs to feel real, like there might be an actual human sales rep on the other end that your prospect might benefit from engaging with. And so it's a sort of a weird thing to ask a chatbot to do. The point is to sound like a human, but I think it can actually really help in that regard, oftentimes because humans are bad at writing like they're humans. So let's take a look at the experiment we ran. This is the prompt we provided to ChatGPT. Write a cold prospecting email from an outsourced IT company in Fort Worth. Your top priority here is to sound as human as possible. And then we gave it some specific instructions. Avoid sounding like a typical marketing email. Use a friendly conversational tone and strive to give the impression that there's a real person on the other end. And here's the email that it came up with. And so I've highlighted in orange and blue a couple of salient aspects. You can see immediately some of the ways it tried to follow my prompt. The highlighted areas here appear to be attempts at being friendly, conversational, and human. And what's so noteworthy about this, if you read through it, is that it's actually really good. It's worth noting that when we performed this experiment last year in 2023, it was clear that ChatGPT was trying to sound human, but it was frequently just a little bit off. And this represents a big improvement. And interestingly, when we asked ChatGPT to be clear and concise, it did an okay job at it, but it didn't sound really like it was coming from a human. And here, when we asked it to write like a human, it actually did a really good job of sounding clear and concise. And I suppose that shouldn't be all that surprising, because when you speak plainly, conversing like an actual human, rather than trying to sound like a website or a brochure, your message is clearer, more authentic, and more resonant. So you can see just using this casual language really cuts to the point and makes it sound like there might be someone on the other end that deserves a response and with whom you can converse. But this one is subjective. So as we did last month, I'm not giving it a grade of a letter grade. I'm going to leave it up to you guys to decide whether you thought it did sound human. I think, again, what you want to do is be different, use casual language that feels more like a human and less like a brochure, be conversational, set that conversational tone. And I think ChatGPT did a really good job here. And then most importantly, be real. So ask yourself, do you think that this message gave the impression that there's a real person on the other end? And I would say that just as a suggestion for how to use these things, if it's something that you are incorporating into your biz dev process, it's important to iterate. So if we look back at this slide, this is the first thing that ChatGPT produced after we gave it our prompt. And there's nothing that says you can't ask it to tweak it. So if you put an email that you've written into ChatGPT, you can always ask it to make it sound more human, to make suggestions for making it more conversational. So I think more than anything else, the lesson from this year as AI has improved is that AI is not going to replace humans in terms of the insights and value they bring to the table, but it can serve as a partner with a human in cold outreach, in hitting those fundamental principles that make cold outreach successful. And that's something that we're always here to help with and talk through. So that's something to think about as you consider whether to increase the use of AI in your own biz dev process. Deb, did you want to add anything here?
I think what you said about being partner with ChatGPT is the most important part. And if you don't do that, you really miss that human sounding interaction.
Right. I think, the tendency is to want to delegate so much of what, the tedious pieces of your job to the AI chatbot. But I think if you see it as how can it help me be better at what I want to achieve, that's the right mindset and the framework that you want to use it in. But I think you're the final decision maker. You are the human. You get to decide whether it sounds human enough and whether it's making you better at what you do, and see it as a tool rather than as something that you're delegating sort of your responsibilities to. Okay, so finally, I just want to close out this year's presentation by taking a quick look back at all of the Insiders topics we covered this year, and then offering up a list of 12 questions that came out of these sessions that you can carry with you as you look toward BizDev in 2025. Oftentimes we will cover a topic in a given session that we've covered in previous years, and there's nothing really new that comes out of it, but I didn't want to ignore some of the good stuff that we talked through and thought about in 2024. So I broke this up into 2 slides, obviously. So in January, we talked about, as we usually do, the science of B2B sales, the stats and formulas and trends that demonstrate sort of the current state of play with respect to cold outreach, cold calling, emailing. and then the specific frameworks that we use to make sure we're focused on the fundamentals. And the question I would recommend you ask yourself is, do you know the latest B2B stats and trends? What is the latest set of information that you're working with? And if it's not that recent, do you think you're really as prepared as you could be heading into the next year? I mean, things are changing so quickly in this space that it really behooves all of us to make an effort to learn the latest stats and trends in terms of what's effective, what's working, what's not, and how to combine the various tools and resources available to us to generate the best results. As we discussed, we looked at the power of social proof in February. So just ask yourself, do you tell stories about your current and former clients? Is that something that's baked into your process in your quest for new clients? And if you're not, are there ways that you could do it, whether it's cold calling, email outreach on your website, that would really harness those previous successes to demonstrate the value you provide to clients and prospects? Again, email personalization tips. How much do you even think about your prospect's perspective in your cold outreach? I think that's really the fundamental piece of that topic. Is this is really about what your prospect cares about. So personalization, just like providing insights and value, is an effort to think about it from their perspective, their position, and orient your biz dev strategy toward that rather than towards, how you would define what you provide, the features and benefits of your product. In April, we talked about prospect resistance, what to do when your prospect says no. So a good question to ask yourself is, are you prepared for your prospect to resist? Prospect resistance is part of the game in cold outreach. So if you're not prepared, if you don't have a strategy, then you're really not going into it from the best posture. And then more pointedly, do you have a plan for all of the common objections? There are 4 or 5 objections that prospects provide on almost every call. So there's no excuse not to have a plan for how to respond when they provide one of those objections. As we often do, we reviewed cold call scripts that can help you set more appointments. We like an approach that's situational and flexible rather than rigid and detailed. But we also constantly look at our own scripts to see what can be approved and see what other people are using, hopefully to incorporate new ideas into our approach. So ask yourself, when's the last time you updated your cold call scripts? Do you actively research new approaches? And if you don't, or if you need help, we're always here to provide some guidance. In June, we talked about automation. Now, this is slightly different from AI. This has to do with ways to automate pieces of your prospecting process to take some of those tedious responsibilities and duties off of your shoulders so that you can spend more of your valuable time on the high value prospecting activities. So think about whether your process includes high effort, low reward activities that could be replaced with automation. And a key example of what we do for clients in this arena is automated email prospecting campaigns, where we write your messages and then set up a campaign where it's constantly sending introductory emails and follow-ups to your prospects on a gradual basis so that you don't have to send those one-off emails and you can focus on cold calling or a smaller set of your most high-value prospects. And happy to talk through how to incorporate that into your process if you're not already doing it. And then for our second half of the year, in July, we talked about the 7 skills of sales masters. And these are really 7 fundamental things that separate the most successful sales reps from the more mediocre ones. And I think the question here is, aside from the specific skills we covered, think about whether your process is rooted in fundamentals of sales success. Some of them we've already talked about today. Looking at things from your prospect's perspective, continually learning and training yourself to get better based on the most recent set of information. Or are you really thinking more about tactics and scripts and lists? Because if you're focused on that latter set, you might not be hitting some of those key fundamentals that have really defined sales success over the years and the ones that are becoming more important on the current landscape. Something we talk about frequently is selling the appointment rather than selling your product. Your goal at the beginning of this cold outreach process is to start a conversation with your prospect. You're not trying to sell anything on an initial cold call or cold email. So really think about, how does your prospect benefit from that meeting, that conversation, even if they never become a client? Because if you can't answer that question, then it's going to be really hard to sell that appointment by bringing value and ideas. In September, we talked about a reply strategy for more leads. So this is where we really talked about when your prospect replies to an email, regardless of what that reply looks like, do you have a strategy for then moving that towards a conversation? So oftentimes in cold outreach, as we just talked about, when your prospect says no, they're going to say not interested, or I already have somebody. Do you have a strategy for turning the conversation around? Because that's a really key thing. Like I said, resistance is part of the process. It's part of the game in cold outreach. And if you don't have a strategy for dealing with that resistance over email or over a cold call, then you're really leaving a lot on the table and at a disadvantage relative to the people who are thinking about it that way. And then finally, the new rules of cold calling. So beyond scripts, how do you maximize the odds that your cold calling will generate conversations and leads? I think too often people think about cold calling as just a script, but it's really not. It's a strategy that starts before you even pick up the phone by creating a list of high-value prospects, making sure that you're not spending time researching every single one of your prospects from your highest value to your lowest value. And every year we talk about sort of those key fundamentals that make cold calling effective. And I'd encourage you to attend a future session on that if you're interested. We just talked about if AI can write your B2B emails. So think about, do you incorporate AI into your lead gen process? How do you balance AI's efficiency with your human touch? And again, happy to think through all that because this is a really evolving piece of the B2B landscape. And there's no right answer right now, but I think there are a lot of smart people using it in effective ways. So happy to be of assistance. And then finally, today's presentation, I think the key here is obviously, how will you use the lessons of 2024 to guide and improve your biz dev strategy in 2025? Deb, do you have anything to add as we wrap up here?
I encourage each of you to share with us your frustrations and your successes, any questions or problems or ideas that you have. We might not have a solution, but we're always going to try and help continuously improve your process to have new business development success in the coming year.